Space, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise, but even in the episodes proper, not everything was perfect. And today, we'll take a look at some of those mistakes. Hello and welcome to Backtrek, a web series that focuses on the background information of any given topic in Star Trek. In today's episode, we're taking a look at the mistakes made in the first half of Season 1 of Star Trek the Original Series. Please note, many Vulcan moons ago, when I started this channel, I made a bunch of these mistake videos, poring over each episode multiple times in order to find every little detail out of place in every Star Trek episode. As fans of the channel pointed out to me at the time, I really didn't need to do that at all, as the great and wonderful Larry Nemecek had actually released several books on that exact topic. And now, after several years of searching my local used bookstores, I finally got a copy, and decided to revisit this video series, condensing those early episodes into only 2 videos per season, and to add anything I originally missed or removed mistakes that canon has since corrected. Lastly, I'd also just like to say that these videos are all in good fun. They all come from a love and celebration of Trek rather than a hateful place, so please keep that in mind. Anyhow, grab some colored cubes in a bowl, sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. This is the first pilot episode of Star Trek, which wasn't bought up by the network, but instead warranted an unprecedented second pilot to be made, so I'll go a bit easier on this episode than I will with all the others. Why is Spock limping when he beams down to Talos 4? Did the transporter somehow sprain his ankle? When on the planet, a crew member tells the Talos survivor that,
"And you won't believe how fast you can get back. Well, the time barrier's been broken. Our new ships can..."
So, are we to believe that these survivors made it to Talos 4 without warp drive? When captured by the Talosians, Pike exclaims where he's from and what he represents.
My name is Christopher Pike, commander of the Space Vehicle Enterprise from a stellar group at the other end of this galaxy.
How can this be correct, when we know from series like Deep Space Nine and Voyager exactly how long it would take from the other end of the galaxy to get home?
Even at maximum speeds, it would take 75 years to reach the Federation.
When Kirk, McCoy, and Darnell first beam down to the planet, Kirk has a tricorder in his hands. Then, suddenly, it's slung over his shoulder. Then, when he picks up what he loosely defines as flowers, suddenly, the tricorder is gone from his shoulder and back in his hand. Does crewman Darnell not understand what an order is? Would a Starfleet officer really just leave his position and go wandering off for a booty call? You're not Captain Kirk, Darnell. Also, why didn't Darnell scream when he was being sucked dry by the salt sucker, like Kirk at the end of the episode? After all, we heard Nancy scream, so wouldn't we have heard his? While on the bridge, Spock tells Uhura,
"Vulcan has no moon, Miss Uhura."
I'm not surprised, Mr. Spock.
What about in Star Trek the Motion Picture, at least before the remastered versions? Why does Kirk want to return to the ship to find Nancy Crater? Doesn't McCoy have a tricorder? Couldn't he use that to find Nancy? They couldn't have gotten out of range of it already, could they? Speaking of sensors, why doesn't the Enterprise's sensors detect the crewman's dead body on the planet's surface? After all, body heat doesn't dissipate that quickly. Watch the plate of food that Yeoman Rand brings to Sulu. Notice the colored cubes are actually in a bowl. But then later, after the Nancy Green salt sucker shows up, and suddenly it's a plate full of colored cubes. Shouldn't Captain Kirk be trained in tactical maneuvers both in space and on the ground? In the scenes where Kirk and Spock are attempting to capture Dr. Crater, Kirk jumps under a large stone slab that Dr. Crater has just shot out the middle pillar holding it up. Does that make sense? What if Dr. Crater shoots out one of the other pillars? Couldn't the falling slab then kill Kirk? And to make matters worse, he tempts fate by doing the same thing moments later. In the opening log, Kirk calls the starship Antares the cargo vessel Antares.
Now maneuvering to come alongside cargo vessel Antares.
But then later, after it's destroyed, he refers to it as the science probe vessel Antares.
USPA headquarters notified of the mysterious loss of science probe vessel Antares.
Did the Antares change its mission profile after leaving Charlie on board the Enterprise? And during the scenes leading up to Kirk's learning of the Antares' destruction, Kirk and Charlie enter the turbolift to head to the bridge. Note, Kirk's wearing his yellow tunic. And then, when they exit onto the bridge, Kirk is suddenly wearing a green tunic. Did he change in the turbolift? When Charlie goes to Rand's quarters in order to confront her, Rand backs up and in fear presses the comm button to contact the bridge. And valiantly, Kirk and Spock rush down to her quarters. The problem is though, if you watch the scene, the viewer shows that the comm channel is already open. Then, she presses the button and turns off the comm channel. So, how did Kirk and Spock hear what was going on in her quarters? This episode was actually the second pilot created by Gene Roddenberry to sell the series to the network, but since it aired as the third episode in the series, there are huge discrepancies when it comes to the uniforms. Suddenly, all the women are in pants and shirts like the men, and there are no red uniforms. Also, the colors on the yellow and blue uniforms seems a bit off. After Mitchell begins to become a superhuman in sickbay, Spock and McCoy are worried about the rate at which Mitchell is reading the computer's library. I don't know what they're so worried about though, as Mitchell is reading the same pages over and over again. Just before the fight scene between Kirk and Mitchell, we get a shot of Kirk's tombstone, which reads James R. Kirk. I thought Kirk's middle name was Tiberius.
James Tiberius Kirk.
And after the fight, we're left with this oddity. Why is there a sleeping crewman at the communication station? I guess communications is not that exciting of a job. Poor Uhura. What's with the isolation suits in this episode? Shouldn't they actually isolate? Yet, we see Tormolen casually reach under his helmet, so how exactly is that isolating? And why did he take off his gloves and do that anyhow? They were obviously ordered to wear the suits to begin with, so he thought that taking off his gloves was somehow a good idea? We also see a scene in which Spock comments on a woman that's been strangled. Maybe Spock should use his tricorder, as that's obviously a mannequin. Why exactly does liquid drip sideways on this planet? In this episode, Kirk makes a log entry.
Our need for efficiency, critical. But unknown to us, a totally new and unusual disease has been brought aboard.
How exactly does Kirk know what's going to happen? Does he have a dilithium crystal ball? Why doesn't Spock hear the conversation between Riley and Sulu on the bridge? In Operation Annihilate, we find out that Spock has amazing hearing when he overhears McCoy's comment to Kirk.
I said, please don't tell Spock that I said he was the best first officer in the fleet.
Why, thank you, Dr. McCoy.
You've been so concerned about his Vulcan eyes, Doctor, you forgot about his Vulcan ears.
So, shouldn't he have known about Sulu's plans? When Riley has locked engineering up tight, why don't they just use a site-to-site transport like Kirk does in the episode The Day of the Dove? And that transport was done while the Enterprise was at warp. When Scotty finishes cutting through the bulkhead, he immediately grabs the cutout piece with his hands. Exactly how fast does phaser-fired metal cool down anyhow? Shouldn't this cutout still be white hot? When they succeed in imploding the engines, implosion doesn't seem the right word to be used, but okay, I accept it. Why do 4 of the bridge crew members grimace in pain, while the others on the bridge are just fine? In the planetary scenes in this episode, if you look closely, you can see the uniform insignias have been removed from the actors. But when Captain Kirk is beamed aboard the Enterprise, his insignia suddenly reappears. Why did Scotty beam Kirk aboard without double-checking the transporter? He sends a technician to get a piece of equipment to make sure that the transporter is working fine, but then he transports Kirk anyhow. Does this seem safe? One of the biggest issues with this episode is why didn't Kirk simply send down a shuttlecraft to pick up the stranded crew? There was no explanation for this in the episode. In fact, it isn't even discussed. Phasers are pretty interesting in this episode as well. Watch Sulu's phaser when he fires it to heat up some of the rocks on the planet's surface. Mr. Sulu holds the phaser very still, and yet the beam sweeps back and forth. There seems to be some interesting problems when it comes to evil Kirk. First off, after Yeoman Rand scratches the evil Kirk, he heads to his quarters and proceeds to cover up those scratches with makeup. The question is, why does Kirk have makeup in his dresser? In the scene in engineering, where good Kirk is attempting to capture evil Kirk, we see that evil Kirk in a close-up shot has a Type 2 phaser. But then, in the long shot, it looks like evil Kirk is holding a Type 1 phaser. When evil Kirk heads to the bridge to take command after overpowering good Kirk, the navigator gives a status report on the landing party saying,
"No word from Mr. Solo, sir."
Who's Mr. Solo? Did we miss a franchise crossover? Why exactly does Spock call his Vulcan half-alien? Doesn't he consider himself to be Vulcan? Wouldn't he call his human half-alien in that case? And at the end of the episode, Spock seems to be taunting Rand, almost seeming to be justifying evil Kirk's attempt to SA her.
The imposter had some interesting qualities, wouldn't you say?
Does this seem like the type of thing anyone, especially Spock, would say? After the women get beamed aboard from their doomed craft, we get close-ups of each of the men in the transporter room. Look at McCoy. In the long shot, he's wearing his standard uniform. But then, in the close-up, it's his short-sleeved uniform. And then, once again, it's back to his long-sleeved one in the very next shot. Speaking of McCoy and close-ups, when one of Mudd's women head into sickbay, she suggestively saunters in front of the medical monitor. In this long shot, you can see her head clearly in front of the monitor, but then, in the close-up shot of the monitor, her head is gone. In the scene where Mudd wants to give Eve the Venus drug, watch the box he carries them in. He opens the box, which has a hinged lid on it, then suddenly in the next shot, the lid is gone. Why didn't Uhura pick up the transmission to the surface that Mudd made? In Elan of Troyes and Journey to Babel, she was able to detect both those transmissions. When in the conference room after Kirk leaves Mudd to lay out his diabolical scheme, why didn't the two security officers in the background report to Kirk what Mudd intended to do? It's not like he was being quiet about it. And security seems to be really off in this episode in general. After being confined to his quarters, Mudd bursts into the meeting between Kirk and Childress. So what exactly does confined to quarters mean then? What's with Nurse Chapel in this episode? She seems to really love Dr. Corby, yet a few episodes before in The Naked Now, she's not pining for Dr. Corby, she's pining for Spock. Watch the comm light on Uhura's station. Even though there are multiple times when it's used, the light never turns on. After meeting Andrea and declaring her to be an android, Dr. Corby attempts to convince Nurse Chapel that having a half-naked woman around isn't a problem, because androids can't love. Isn't Corby an android? Isn't he in love with Nurse Chapel? It's not like he's forgotten he's an android, as when it's discovered later on that he is, he tries to justify his existence as that android. Rock's not very observant, is he? While Dr. Corby is talking to Kirk when Kirk's tied in the chair, Kirk unties that rope and he later uses it to choke Corby. Yet Rock is behind a little ways on the same side as where Kirk is untying the rope. When the android Kirk returns to the ship, he heads past Spock and enters Kirk's quarters. The sound the door makes seems to be off. And once Kirk retrieves the command packet that Dr. Corby had sent him to get, Android Kirk exits Kirk's quarters, and suddenly, the command packet is gone. Multiple times during this episode, the communicators are missing their distinctive chirps. Looks like the editors forgot to put that sound effect in.
Spock here.
After the Onlys steal the away team's communicators, why doesn't the ship simply beam more down? After all, wouldn't they have figured out that something might just be wrong with them after there wasn't a peep from their landing party? Wouldn't they be able to see that the landing party was still all moving around in the same building? Besides, what about the communicators that the security officers had while they were on patrol? Wouldn't they have had their communicators still on them? The ropes that bind Yeoman Rand are very interesting. They're under her elbows in the long shot, but in the close-ups, suddenly they're above her elbows. Spock is a scientist, and yet he exclaims to McCoy,
Without them, it could be a beaker full of death.
"That's not a beaker, Spock. It's a flask, and you, of all people, should know that." At the end of this episode, Kirk orders,
Mr. Spock,
Captain?
full ahead. Walk back to 1.
shouldn't that order be given to the helmsman? During the communications exchange after Van Gelder is captured, McCoy strolls onto the bridge to dispute Dr. Adams' findings. Wouldn't Adams have heard what McCoy said? After all, Kirk puts Dr. Adam on hold after McCoy speaks.
Tragedy, Doctor.
Jim, it doesn't quite ring true.
Dr. Adams, please stand by.
Why does a penal colony have such unprotected and huge vents for prisoners to escape from? When Dr. Adams uses the neuroneutralizer on Kirk, he orders Kirk to drop his phaser, and Kirk pulls it out and points it at the neural neutralizer, but ultimately drops it. Yet, when Kirk is ordered to drop his communicator, he pulls it out, flips it open, and attempts to contact the Enterprise. And then it takes a stronger blast from the neural neutralizer to finally get Kirk to drop it, after he attempts to contact the Enterprise for a second time. That begs the question then, why wasn't Kirk able to fire his phaser the first time when Adams ordered him to drop it? Why exactly does the neural neutralizer room have a hinged door when every other room in the facility has an automatic one like on the Enterprise? Again, at the end of this episode, Kirk orders Spock instead of the helmsman to take the ship out of orbit, and Mr. Spock even smiles. Does that make sense? After encountering the cube probe, Spock tells Sulu to sound the alert, and Sulu does.
Bridge to all decks. Condition alert. All decks. Condition alert. Captain Kirk to the bridge.
Meanwhile, Kirk is in sickbay getting a physical. At one point, Kirk gets angry at McCoy for not telling him about the red alert. What? Why? Didn't Kirk hear Sulu's message over the ship's intercom? Wouldn't sickbay have received this message from the bridge as well? After all, during a red alert, wouldn't sickbay need to be prepared for casualties? Communications in general are a problem in this episode. Multiple times, Kirk responds to comm whistles. While in his quarters, Kirk hears the whistle, responds, sits back, and then moments later there's another whistle, and Kirk doesn't respond, and rightfully so. The message wasn't for him. But the question is, how does he know when the communications are for him? Spock uses a strange simile when giving his opinion on the probe cube.
First, a space buoy of some kind.
Second.
Flypaper.
Do they really still have flypaper in the 23rd century? Why does Spock keep referring to his parents in the past tense?
In some manner, he was reminiscent of my father.
Then may heaven have helped your mother.
She considered herself a very fortunate Earthwoman.
Last time I checked, both were alive and well. See Journey to Babel. Watch Spock while he's on the bridge. In one scene, Spock wears an earpiece in his ear. But then, when we get a close-up shot, suddenly, the earpiece is gone. At the end of the episode, Kirk is suspicious of Balak's drink, and so, to allay his fears, Balak pours himself a glass and takes a sip. The problem is that this shouldn't really allay Kirk's fears at all. First off, because the drinks were already pre-prepared before arriving on the tray. And second, the substances may not be harmful to Balak's species, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it isn't toxic to humans. Why didn't he just have it scanned? Spock must pluck his eyebrows. In the cage scenes, they are very, very bushy. Why does Starbase 11 have hinge doors at all? Isn't this a Starfleet facility? Shouldn't they have sliding doors like every other Starfleet facility we've ever seen? Time sure flies when you're at Starbase 11. When Kirk beams down, it's daytime. They go to see Captain Pike and it's still day. But suddenly in the next scene in Mendez's office, it's nighttime. So just how fast does day turn to night at Starbase 11? In one scene, Mendez shows Kirk a highly classified report on Talos 4. It's so classified that Kirk even questions Mendez showing it to him. If it's that classified, why is Miss Piper just standing there in the room? Shouldn't she have been ordered to leave? When Pike is kidnapped, Miss Piper screams. Then the Commodore responds to a communication.
Mendez here, what is it?
Starship Enterprise, Commodore. It's warping out of orbit.
The problem here is, there is never a comm whistle for the Commodore to respond to. The computer aboard the Starship Enterprise must enjoy a great drama production. When Kirk and Mendez find out that they can't regain control of the ship, the computer makes sure to zoom out so Spock can see a reaction shot of Mendez. Why does everyone at the hearing wear a dress uniform except for Scotty? The court recording computer is important, isn't it? It's there to record the proceedings for the record. Yet, after the first time it's turned on and then turned off, it's never turned on again. After Mendez is given command of the Enterprise, Hansen calls from the bridge saying, "Bridge to Commander." Isn't Mendez's rank Commodore? Now, I know it could be said that Hansen was referring to the Commodore's current position as Commander of the Enterprise. However, if he was, shouldn't it have been Bridge to Captain? Also, when Decker assumes command of the Enterprise in the Doomsday Machine, no one seems to have a problem calling him Commodore. I guess the Talosians really don't know anything about technology. They still haven't fixed the elevator door that the Enterprise's landing party had destroyed. There are a lot of problems with numbers in this episode. First off, the stardate given by the computer for the events that happened before Kodos the Executioner disappeared is stardate 2794.7. Supposedly, these events happened over 20 years prior to this episode. Why then, in previous episodes, do we have stardates that chronologically appear before that date?
Captain's log, stardate 1312.4. Captain's log, stardate 1512.2. Captain's log, stardate 1533.6. Captain's log, stardate 1672.1.
During those stardates, Kirk is in command of the Enterprise, and he certainly wasn't a preteen at the time. Second, are there really only 9 witnesses to Kodos? He killed 4,000 colonists, half the population, yet only 9 people have ever seen him? At first I thought they were referring to witnesses of the tragedy itself, but no, they make it clear that it was for identification purposes. This makes no sense. Kodos is a governor or mayor of this colony, and no one has ever seen him? Really, why would they need witnesses at all? There's got to be DNA or fingerprints in the 23rd century, doesn't there? And third, when Kirk is making inquiries to the computer, it confidently replies that there were 9 witnesses. However, this main computer, the heart of the Enterprise, fails to tell Kirk that 7 of them are now dead. So effectively, there were only actually 2 witnesses. And we know that the computer knows that 7 were now dead, as Spock uses the computer later on and is able to tell Kirk that piece of information himself. During a scene where Spock is talking to Dr. McCoy, McCoy exclaims that he now knows the reason that Vulcan was conquered.
Oh, now I know why they were conquered.
Conquered? Conquered by who? In the Immunity Syndrome, Spock declares that Vulcan has never been conquered.
Vulcan has not been conquered within its collective memory. Memory goes back so far that no Vulcan can conceive of a conqueror.
How exactly did Spock figure out that Kirk was stuck on the events of Tarsus 4? When he makes inquiries himself to the computer, he asks the computer to report on what events that the 4 people have in common. The problem is, he includes Anton Caridian in that list. Anton Caridian didn't exist at the time of the executions. Why is Riley the only one on duty in engineering? I get that the Enterprise has nights and days, but are we really to believe that an active duty area like engineering, first of all, has all its lights turned down low, and second, that there isn't an entire duty shift working in engineering? Why does the map on the view screen list Romulus' sister planet as Rom-2? I thought the planet's name was Remus. When Outpost 4 is under attack, Kirk orders the outpost to transmit its visuals of the enemy vessel, and Outpost 4 does that. But after the outpost is destroyed, the Enterprise continues to receive pictures of that enemy vessel. Shouldn't the transmission have been cut? The Enterprise must be poorly designed. Without receiving a single hit, the phasers burn out and stop working. Why? Shouldn't a starship like the Enterprise have backup systems to prevent situations like that? During the briefing room sequence, Scotty says that he has no doubt that the Enterprise could stand toe-to-toe with the Romulans in a fight.
No question. Their power is simple impulse. Meaning we cannot run.
Does that make sense? How did the Romulan ships get through the neutral zone to Federation space without warp drive? Exactly how far away from Federation space is Romulus? Also, how do the Romulans then have a weapon that can travel at warp? We know it does, since Kirk orders emergency warp reverse, and yet the weapon still overtakes them. There are a lot of questions surrounding Scotty's statement. The Romulan's plasma weapon itself deserves a little scrutiny. After all, to me it appears as a cloud of energy. So why didn't the Enterprise simply move left or right out of its way? Why are the crew whispering during the silent running parts of the episode? Doesn't Kirk and crew know that sound doesn't travel through space? When Spock goes to the phaser room to fire the weapons, we get shots of the bridge red alert panel by the turbolift. In one of Kirk's close-ups, the light is not flashing. Then, in the next, it is. And the same thing is happening in the shots where Spock is running towards the phaser room. The lights in the corridor are off, even though the red alert sirens are clearly sounding. Well, there you have it. Thank you for watching today's episode of Backtrek. What did you think of all the mistakes I've pointed out in the first half of Season 1 of Star Trek: The Original Series? Do you have any canon explanation for those mistakes? Well, leave your comments in the section below, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, hitting that little bell icon so you won't miss a single video we release. Also, be sure to check out Larry's YouTube channel and show that man all the love he truly deserves. The link to his channel is in the video description below. Want to help the channel continue to show its love for Star Trek through videos like this one? Then consider becoming a channel member subscriber or a channel patron. Both a major help that allows his channel to purchase resources and 3D models to keep it going. The link to both memberships is in the description below. Thanks again for watching, live long, and prosper.